Joy, I never said that. And see, this is where the gaslighting
I'm going
comes
to read
in.
what you said.
All I was talking about was the marriage rates.
Stop. No,
Joy,
that's not what you said. Let's play what you said.
Play
what he said. Play what he said.
Families. You're saying I said it was the golden era. I think it has followed suit with misleading headlines, and that's wrong.
Now I'm going to talk. Do I have a chance? Good. Now, you talked about the black father being the black father.
I grew up with my mom. My dad and my mom, things didn't work out. As an adult, I look at my father and I say, bro, I don't know what happened, but you my father and I love you.
Wow.
I don't know what happened. I wasn't there.
Wow.
But I'm gonna tell you this, growing up, the one thing I knew I wanted to do, and this is not about my father, this is about what I wanted to do, is I wanted to be a father to myself.
Wow.
And so one of the things that's actually happening in our culture, which you're now starting to see in our politics, is the reinvigoration of black families with younger black men and black women. And that is also helping to breed the revival of a black middle class in America. You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together.
That's right.
During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people always have been conservative minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then HEW, Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are. What's happened in America the last 10 years, and I say it because it's my contemporaries, it's Wesley's contemporaries, you're starting to see more black people be married in homes, raising kids. It's when you home with your wife raising your kids, and then you look at the world, you're saying, now wait a minute, time out. This does not look right. How can I get something to my kids? It goes back to the conversation of generational wealth. Not just having a job, generational wealth. I'm looking at my kids, how can my kids be on my shoulders when they take off in life? That's what's happening.
When the American Civil War ends, the U.S. government enters Reconstruction with 3 amendments to the Constitution. Slavery is abolished, and former slaves are granted citizenship and the right to vote. At the state and local level, white Southern Democrats implement laws to suppress the political and economic gains made by African Americans. Under the Separate but Equal Clause, the U.S. Supreme Court legitimizes segregation and social discrimination, treating black people as second-class citizens. Known collectively as Jim Crow laws, after a racial depiction performed in blackface, these laws reinforce racial prejudice and deny rights to black people in the United States. Federal legislation brings the Jim Crow era to an end, yet its long shadow still looms large over the struggle for equality.
Byron Donalds asserted that black families were more intact and held conservative values during the Jim Crow era. This statement is supported by historical data and expert opinions.
They did not say that Jim Crow and segregation, the conditions were better for blacks. He said our response to it was better than it is today. Between 1930 and 1940, black families had the highest marriage rate of any group in society. More blacks were killed in 1 year in America than was killed and lynched in 40 years of the Klans. So these men were right in their claims.
The family structure of African Americans has long been a matter of national public policy interest. A 1965 report by Daniel Patrick Moynihan, known as the Moynihan Report, examined the link between black poverty and family structure. It hypothesized that the destruction of the black nuclear family structure would hinder further progress economically and politically. At the time of the Moynihan Report, the out-of-wedlock birth rate among black people was 25%. This rate increased significantly over the following decades, reaching 68% in 1991 and 72% in 2011. The 2018 National Vital Statistics Report indicated a figure of 69.4% for black babies born to unmarried mothers. The socio-economic challenges faced by black families during the Jim Crow era were severe. They had limited access to quality education and employment opportunities and faced economic disenfranchisement. Despite these challenges, many black families maintained strong social structures and community support networks. The church played a central role, providing spiritual and moral guidance while fostering a sense of community and solidarity. You can see why infiltrating the church, where the most recent great example of this is Jim Clyburn, when Joe Biden was struggling in the Democratic primary leading up to the 2020 election, he went to the church and said, "You've got to support this man."
The nerve of Joe Biden to appear at a black church after he has reneged on the promises that he made to the black community when he ran for president in 2020. He has some gall, but we can't be mistaken. Jim Clyburn is sitting there right next to Joe Biden, almost as a sidekick, so to speak. And Jim Clyburn bears the responsibility of some of this as well, because he was the one that told his constituents to support Joe Biden in 2020 because Joe Biden was going to deliver for the African-American community. I actually graduated from the University of South Carolina, but I didn't grow up in South Carolina. So I never really understood the admiration for someone like Jim Clyburn. People would say to me, it's because he hosts a fish fry. You can fry your own fish. This just goes to show you how little we are willing to settle for in the black community. We need to start asking these leaders, some of the black leaders, what are they doing for the community today? And Jim Clyburn is not doing much for the community today. His district is one of the poorest districts in the country. Meanwhile, Jim is living just fine.
You control the church, you control the community. Cultural values such as hard work, self-reliance, and strong family bonds were crucial for navigating and resisting the oppressive conditions of Jim Crow. All of those values lead you towards socially being conservative and then also politically conservative. The harder you work, the more self-reliant you are, the stronger your family bonds are, the less likely you are to be a Democrat. One vivid personal narrative that illustrates the challenges and resilience of black families during this period comes from Dark Room, a memoir in black and white by Leila Quintero Weaver. Weaver recounts a moving incident where her family faced direct racial violence. Her father, a respectful community leader and devoutly religious man, was attacked by a group of white men as he returned from a late-night church meeting. Despite the brutal assault, which left him severely injured, Weaver's father's unwavering faith and resilience shone through. Instead of seeking revenge, he gathered his family and led them in prayer, asking for strength and guidance. This act of forgiveness and faith deeply impacted Weaver and her siblings, instilling in them the values of compassion, endurance, and the importance of family unity. This story vividly describes the family's close-knit nature and their conservative values, their religious values, their faith. Not a rainbow, not a corporate Democrat, not looking for revenge when nobody's done anything to you. That's the feeling you get with the attacks against Donald Trump. What has Donald Trump done against you blacks? This was an active attack against this family, and the father leading the family led them in prayer. The father, as the leader, the spiritual leader of the family, physical leader of the family, provided a solid foundation during times of crisis. Fast forward to today, and we've got unhinged lunatics, particularly black women, who don't respect black men, don't respect men in general.
Black men sometimes feel like they're ignored or they're put down, particularly sometimes even by black women in the media. So this is not that. But I do hear Roland's point that felt ignored. But you feel ignored, and then you go over to the other side. The oppressed feel oppressed, so then you go and try to align with the oppressor. So I'm not putting black men down, but sometimes it's like, well, some of you Kevin Samuels following Tariq Nasheed quoting people, please look at the truth and see what's happening and get in line with some of the black women. Is majority, like he said, vote Democrat, but that margin of people who can be plucked away from your people and go advance policies that harm your people, I just don't understand that.
They believe they are God. They act like it. Joy Reid's critique of Byron Donalds focused on his comments about the unity of black families during Jim Crow and their conservative values. However, Reid misrepresented Donald's views.
Jim Crow lasted roughly from 1867 after the Civil War to 1968. Is there a specific period between 1867 and 1968 that you thought was this golden era for black families, or a time that was good for black families?
Joy, I never said that. And see, this is where the gaslighting comes in.
I'm going to read what you said.
All I was talking about was the marriage rates.
Stop. No,
Joy,
that's not what you said. Let's play what you said.
Play
what he said. Play what he said.
Families. You're saying I said it was the golden era.
I'm going to play. I'm going to play what you said.
I said that it was better for black families. I never said that. I said
play what he said.
Play what I said.
Play what he said.
During Jim Crow, the black family was together.
That's right.
During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people always have been conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then H.E.W., Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are.
Because she doesn't respect him. He's not really black to her. Those views aren't black views, not anymore at least. Portraying him as nostalgic for an era of segregation and oppression. Does that make any sense to anybody listening, that Byron Donalds wants oppression and segregation? This approach reveals her tendency to pander to liberal narratives without nuance. Reid's attempt to discredit Donalds are not only phony, but hypocritical, as she herself tries to appear more palatable to white audiences with her short blonde hair. Her constant attacks on black males who don't conform to her agenda show her deep-seated bias. At one point, Joy Reid even asked Byron Donalds about the race of his wife.
Last question.
Which creates better people going forward.
Last question, and then I'm going to let you go. Last question. We're out of time, but I'm going to give you one more question. During Jim Crow, could your family have existed? You are in an interracial marriage. Your wife is a white conservative activist. Could your family have existed at all during Jim Crow?
No, it could not, Joy, and we all know that. But that's why I am blessed to live in America today as opposed to America during that time. But we cannot ignore the realities of not having fathers in homes. That is important for black people today and all people today as we move forward for a better America.
We are out of time. What I'm grateful for is that we do not live in the Jim Crow era and that fathers do not face the threat of lynching.
I'm very grateful of that.
Perhaps don't bring up Jim Crow when you're trying to make that example. Representative Brian.
What does the race of his wife have to do with anything that he said? Straw man argument.
Now, sadly, the politics of personal destruction is nothing new from the left, as Congressman Donalds' wife, Erica, is now shining a light on the attacks that they both received from unhinged liberal agitators, tweeting, quote, Byron and I have been together for 23 plus years, and the most racist attacks we experience are always from the left. They can't accept that a free-thinking black man achieved success on his own merits, and they sure as heck can't stand that he's married to me. Cry harder, haters. Here with reaction, Congressman Byron Donalds and his wife, Erica. Erica, I think you need to join him in Congress and the Senate, in politics, because I loved your tweet, and you're right. I've gotten to know your husband, and he's a natural-born leader, a great story in terms of personal success. Have you gotten a lot of reaction to that?
Definitely more reaction than I expected, Sean, and I really appreciate you having me on. But the truth is just what you said. My husband is a natural-born leader. He is the future of the Republican Party. His colleagues in Congress know it. His colleagues from the Florida House know it. People who worked with him in his career in finance know it. I certainly know it, and my boys do. It's unfortunate that those on the other side they're the ones trying to tokenize him and say that the only reason he's successful is because of the color of his skin or because of who his wife is and the color of my skin. We all know that that's not true, and he has achieved his success by hard work, merit, and intelligence, and I'm so proud of him.
What does the race of his wife have to do with anything that he said? Straw man argument, race baiting argument. Without strong black men, you end up with lunatic black women like Joy Reid and Jamel Hill and Nicole Hannah-Jones. Various media outlets covered the discussion, with headlines focusing on the fervor. General patterns in media interpretation often involve a tendency to simplify narratives for broader consumption of misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. In this case, many media outlets framed Donald's comments as an endorsement of Jim Crow, ignoring his argument about black family structures. Typical responses from political commentators aligned with mainstream regime stances quickly condemned Donald's remarks. It is ironic because Byron Donalds misconstrued Ron DeSantis' remarks on was slavery good or bad in a very similar manner. But on this side, despite that karma, Byron Donalds is right here, emphasizing the brutality of the Jim Crow era in an attempt to make Byron Donalds look like some type of idiot. The discussion between Joy Reid and Byron Donalds provides a compelling case study of how historical references can be used and misused in political discourse. By examining the historical accuracy of Donald's comments, you go ahead and you take a look and examine the historical accuracy of Donald's comments. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 is one of the worst pieces of legislation ever happened in our country. And if you are a black identitarian, if you are a black Iman, it's one of the worst pieces of legislation that's ever happened to black people. If that's your ideals. If your ideals are to keep black money with black people, then you would not like what happened after Jim Crow, because that's what happened during Jim Crow. Was everything about Jim Crow great? Was it peaches and cream? Nobody's made that argument. Money stayed within black people. The black family was intact. We had better black excellence. We had better culture, better churches. Media personalities like Joy Reid should be encouraging people to critically reflect on how history is invoked in this political nonsense rhetoric world that we live in, and the impact of these discussions on public understanding, political behavior, and the path moving forward.
Middle MAGA.